Today I will present. Hello everyone. Today I will present a paper accepted by the IJCAI this year. The title is LDP-FL Practical Private Aggregation in Federated Learning with Local Differential Privacy. At first, I will introduce the motivation. Then I will elaborate on the two proposed mechanisms, data preservation with adaptive range and the parameter shuffling. Then I will introduce the experimental results and give the conclusion. We all know that federated learning trains the deep model in the local devices and upload gradients instead of the raw data to the server for aggregations. Although the local data is never shared by the clients, exchanging gradients in a raw form can still leak information. For example, the attacker can use the membership inference attack to infer whether the sample is in the training set based on the uploaded gradients. So to reduce the risk of privacy leakage, previous work proposed federated learning with local differential privacy, which used the AP mechanism to perturb the parameters or the gradients in the local training process. However, there are still some challenges in applying the LDP in the federated learning. The first is that existing approaches have assumed that a fixed range of weights for simplicity. However, the range of model weights at different layers vary significantly. We take the CNN model for the CIFA 10 dataset as example. We can see that the range of the model weights at different layers vary significantly. So assuming weights in all layers to be a fixed range will introduce a large variance of the estimated model weights, which leads to the poor model accuracy. The second challenge is that when client uploads the local model to the server
Maoqiang, we cannot hear you. Hello?
First one is the local private perturbation with adaptive range by considering that model weights at different layers could vary significantly. And the second mechanism is the parameter shuffling mechanism to each client's weights to mitigate the privacy degradation caused by high data dimensionality of models and many query iterations. At first, I will explain the data perturbation with adaptive range. Here, the M is the mechanism. And for each weight, range from the C minus R to the C plus R. Here, the C is the center of weight range, and R is the radius of the range. C and R depend on how we collect the weight. They designed the LDP mechanism to perturb the weights by change the weight into two values with the two probability. Here we can see the values relate to the center, the radius, and the privacy budget epsilon. And the probability also relate to the size of the weight. If the size of the weight is larger, it has the high probability to be changed into this value and less probability to change into this value. This mechanism is equal to adding noise After such processing, all weights have only two values, and we cannot infer the original data according to the weight. And we can see that with a certain privacy budget, the larger range, which indicates the larger R, the larger range of perturbed weights, which indicates a noisier perturbed weight. They prove the proposed mechanism satisfy the LDP with respect to the
Maoqiang, can you go? So you mean when epsilon is larger, will the ratio be large? Let me see. The ratio should be smaller, right?
the ratio.
Yeah, I mean this one. This one.
No, this is the value and this is the probability.
Yeah, so when epsilon is larger, how would these two change? Because you can see like this one can be changed as E epsilon minus 1, E epsilon minus 1 plus 2.
It becomes smaller. It should become
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah. So when epsilon is larger, the noise will become smaller, right?
It's more closer to the C value, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
If the epsilon is smaller, the attacker can.
I think
it's difficult to distinguish the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Gong is consistent with DP definition. If epsilon is smaller, probably we add
Yes,
we add
yes.
more noise. Yeah, it's larger, is that less.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Right. Please move on, Maoqiang.
Okay. Yes, here they proved the proposed mechanism satisfied LDP, and we can see that both the R and the epsilon affect the privacy level. The epsilon determines how well the data is hidden in the cloud, and the R determines the size of the cloud. They also give some numbers about the calculating the average weight. The number 1 indicates that this mechanism introduced zero bias in calculating the average weight. And number 2 shows the variance of the data obtained by the server. And number 3 gives the lower bound and the upper bound of the variance of the estimated average weight. We can see that with enough clients, a large N, we can achieve a low variance on the estimated average weight with a wide range of perturbed data, a large R, and a small privacy cost, a small epsilon. And the theorem shows the accuracy guarantee for calculating the average weights on the server. If the weight range are adaptive, the clients may choose different center and radius to bound their weights. And a client may choose different center and radius for each of its weights in each round. So in such cases, LTP is still satisfied because the noise is applied to each weight separately. It's straightforward that the bias on the estimated average weight is still zero. And when the range is adaptive, here the lemma 3, the range is fixed. And if it's adaptive, here the KNU choose radius RU, it still can calculate the variance by this formula. So from the paper, the proposed data preservation mechanism can satisfy LDP, and the mechanism introduce zero bias to the average weights, and it can calculate the variance and with a bound. And then I will explain the parameter shuffling mechanism. Previous work have showed that when data reports are properly anonymized at each time step and unlinkable over the time, the overall privacy guarantee can be greatly improved. So previous work proposed the model shuffling to anonymize the communications between the cloud and the clients. And the aggregator cannot distinguish the model is from which client, but it doesn't consider the privacy issue due to the high dimensionality of the DNN weights. The aggregator can still link a large number of weight updates together if the client uploaded them at the same time in each iteration. So this paper proposed the parameter shuffling, include two steps. At the first step, each client split the weight of their local model, but labels each weight with an ID to indicate its location in the network structure. And in the second step, each client samples a small random latency T from a uniform distribution for each weight, and the client will wait for the latency T before sending the weight to the cloud. So after this mechanism, since all uploads happen uniformly, randomly during the same period of time, the aggregator cannot distinguish them by upload time and cannot associate the weight update from the same client. This is the advantage of this proposed mechanism. Since the weights are split and uploaded anonymously, the server is unable to link different weight values from the same client. So it cannot infer more information.
Before you move on,
yes.
So could you go to previous page?
Yeah.
So if the server or the cloud, if they can identify, the mapping or relationship between the parameter and their owner, for example, M1 probably own A1, B1, C1, then what's going to happen? Is there a specific attack for this? Like model inversion attack, membership inference attack? I mean, why we want to shuffling the parameters?
Here I will talk about the advantage because it wants to reduce the privacy budget exposure.
Okay, so even the cloud, they can link the weight from the same client at different iteration. The authors didn't talk about the specific reason for that, right? So the only benefit we got is we can reduce the privacy budget or reduce the noise that we add or something. Yeah.
In this paper, they proposed this mechanism. The main purpose is to reduce the privacy budget.
Okay, if we do the parameter shuffling compared to, say, you have 0, 1, 2 design here, compared to 0 design and the first design, the second design, probably you can significantly reduce the privacy budget, right? Even compared with, for example, we directly add a DP into the first design, you can still reduce a big amount of noises or privacy budget, right?
Yeah, here is the here is the calculation. We can see the original federated learning. The LDP is the TD epsilon. The T is iteration number, and the D is the number of weights in the model. And when we use the model shuffling, we can reduce the privacy budget to the D epsilon.
What is the T here? The big T.
The big T is the, for example, the number of update.
The number of update.
Yeah.
Is it like a communication round?
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask the same question.
Yes, it's the communication round, because in the original federated learning, we need to.
I think from the bottom, it seems like this is not the communication rounds. You see in the previous slides, Maoqiang. If you go to the previous slides, yeah, here you see here is
this is the here is not the same. Here is not the same value. Here
this is not
T
T you talked about in the slides 11.
Yes, this T is not this T. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a mistake. Yeah.
So in other words, if we use number 2 design, could you go to next page?
It's a TD epsilon.
Yeah, let me double confirm. The TD epsilon, the big T here, you're talking about the number of global iteration, right? Global rounds, right?
Yes.
So if we use number 2 design, it's going to be D epsilon. This is not going to be increased linearly with the global round.
Yes, because the privacy budget will accumulate according to the global round in the original federated learning.
Then why model shuffling could solve that issue?
Because in each round, by using the model shuffling, the server cannot distinguish the model is from which client. So it can be synced. So the LDP is the same in each round for the aggregator.
And are you talking about model shuffling or parameter shuffling? I think the model shuffling is from somebody else's work, and the parameter shuffling is what this paper proposes, right?
Yes, and when we use the parameter shuffling, and privacy budget will be reduced to the epsilon, because the parameter is also be shuffled. So
okay. So like the original is TD epsilon, the model shuffling is D epsilon, and the parameter shuffling is epsilon.
Yes.
No. I think for the model shuffling is a TD epsilon, right?
No, the original federated learning is TD epsilon.
But for this sentence, right, without parameter shuffling, the privacy budget of LDP will grow to TD epsilon. Parameter shuffling.
I think he just didn't use the right word. He has 3 lines here, like this is TD epsilon, this is T epsilon, this is epsilon.
Yes.
So this one should be the parameter shuffling. This is a model shuffling. And this is one should be like the without any shuffling. I guess this is what he means.
Okay, Xingyue, have a quick question. What is the D here? What is the D, Maoqiang?
The D is the dimension of the DNN weight. Is the number of weights in the model.
Could you explain in very intuitive way? I can understand with original design, right? The noise aggregate, so the LDP aggregate too. So we have TD epsilon. But could you explain why with the model shuffling we can reduce that to D epsilon, and with your proposed parameter shuffling, is reduced to E epsilon itself?
In my opinion, in the original federated learning, the privacy budget will accumulate in the iterative training process. According to the T is the communication round. But when we use the model shuffling, and the aggregator cannot distinguish the uploaded model is from which client. So for each global round, the model perturbation is the same. So the privacy budget is we don't need to consider the accumulate the privacy budget in the model shuffling.
We're talking about the pair learning here, right? So
yeah, federated learning.
But the thing is, say if we're in current round, right? Current round we add some noise, but the noise we add in the current round will affect future learning, right? It's going to accumulate over global round. It's going to say now is a T round. I mean, our noise is going to affect T+1 round, T+2 round, and the future round. Similar thing, T+1 round noise you add should affect the following round. I think the noise still should be aggregated. I mean, accumulated. Why you use this kind of a shuffling? I mean, by the way, what is the pi here? Is a pi function? Or is what is the pi? Pi is a parameter or something?
I think pi should be some permutation. Right?
Permutation. It represents for permutation or shuffling, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pi shuffling, yes. Because in the original federated learning, the student knows the model is from which client. So when we add noise, the privacy budget will accumulate because at each round, the server knows the noisy gradient is from which client. But in the model shuffling at each global round, the server cannot distinguish the upload, the gradient or the parameters is from which client. So for the different round.
So here for the model shuffling, is it only shuffling or shuffling plus anonymization, like anonymous communication?
Here the shuffling is shuffling the entire model.
Yes.
For example,
but you mean like in the original case, you say that the server knows who has which model, right? But with the model shuffling, if I still know who it comes, like for example, you are now shuffling the models. So by shuffling, does it happens every round, but does the shuffling mean that the I not only like I don't know who has the model 1, who has the model 2?
Yes. In the original federated learning, at each round, the server always know the model is from, for example, the M1 is from client 1, the M2 is from the client 2. But after the model shuffling, at each round, the server cannot distinguish the M1 is from which client. He doesn't know.
So who performs this shuffling? Is it happened like so like for this part? Where does it happen? How can we perform this shuffling?
He gives some examples for example, use the VPN or other methods. So they use the anonymized use they use the anonymized to do the shuffling.
So it's like the Tor network, so that when you transmit, they automatically shuffle the models.
Yes, shuffle the model.
Who is in charge of it? Is it third-party server, another server? I think that's Dr. Gong's question.
Yes, I know the question, but the paper doesn't talk about this. He just take example. We can use the anonymize in the, for example, we anonymize the channel. So yes, he didn't tell whether there is another server to do the shuffling. They don't mention.
Okay, but I don't understand why you do the shuffling. You reduce the privacy budget, or you increase the extra randomness. I don't think shuffling provide extra randomness, right? Or security protection. For example,
Shuffling does provide additional randomness, but just like in this modeling shuffling, I'm not sure about how they work, because there are recent papers talking about by using shuffling and secure aggregation together, we can improve it, because shuffling, like they random perturb it and you cannot track. Like if they perturb each round, then originally you can track all the models across all the rounds. But for now, you shuffle in each round. So in each round,
can
you get
you
a
hear
new
me?
model.
Dr.
Yes, we
Gong?
can hear you. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
My surrounding is noisy. Sorry about that. So I just checked the paper. The paper talked that with this parameter shuffling, they will change the delay time. They will first calculate for the delay time, and then every client will wait for, actually, basically, I'm not sure if the same time or they have different times. So the other clients will wait for latency, and then they will send them back to the aggregator. So that
yes,
is
I think you are talking about this parameter shuffling part. Right?
Yeah, parameter shuffling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were discussing the model shuffling. Why model shuffling?
There is a proposal by the other paper.
Yes.
And so we didn't talk about that.
But still, I want to get a very intuitive idea, right? For example, if you talk about the traditional crypto design, like the DAS and something AES, right? We do shuffling too. But when we do the shuffling, it does not increase extra security. It's just a shuffling. I mean, probably, Maoqiang, you need to further study from the attacker point of view. I mean, attack the further learning point of view. If we do the model shuffling, probably it can provide extra benefit. But I think from crypto point of view, if you only do shuffling, you change the mapping relationship, then it does not theoretically increase extra security protection.
Yeah, I know what Dr. Pan's meaning. So here, I think because I read some papers on on the shuffling before, so about this, I think we can just see that shuffling is similar like the sampling. So sampling alone cannot provide differential privacy, but it can magnify the privacy benefit you gain. And there are recent papers, I think that was proposed by Google or something, that are talking about using shuffling, you can amplify the privacy you already got. It's similar like secure aggregation, but not as strong. But it does provide some benefit in theory. And also for like this part, the permutation part, I guess maybe then it's not only shuffling, it's also like you shuffle in like anonymous communication, like the Tor network, the onion routing, so that you don't know which model comes from which. So that I think the reason that we can reduce from original to model shuffling, we can reduce the privacy budget because they can no longer link the models. Originally, you know, like the M1 and M1 at t equals to 1, t equals to 2, you can get all the model parameters for one user. And in the model shuffling scheme, aggregation can no longer link all the models for one user. They only know, like for the current round, I know this M1 comes from one user, M2 comes from a second user, but I don't know their identity. So I cannot link across iterations. I guess that's why they say we no longer have the T here.
So I got another question, follow up. I understand your explanation, Dr. Gong, but for example, the model shuffling and parameter shuffling, they have the amplification impacts, on the privacy. But I wonder if this kind of a shuffling function, is it public or is it private? If it's public, can we do the reverse shuffling?
I don't think it's public, because if it is public, then you can basically reverse it, like what you just said.
If it's private,
the idea of
exactly.
shuffling is trying to hide their.
Yeah, exactly like your question, right? If it's private, who owns this function? Who is in charge of that?
Here, I think it is not like private or public. For this model shuffling, the authors saying that it is just have a random latency here. You can see the item 2. So you have latency, and then you do not like have the order or something. You will use this latency to do that shuffling. You know what I mean?
You use your latency to do the shuffling.
Yes. So
Yes.
everyone will choose different latency time. So for example, M1 will have 1 second latency, and M2 have 2 seconds. So that is a random value, and then the aggregator will, based on that kind of orders, it cannot distinguish which model is from which client.
But can you record that?
I think no, because it is from a uniform distribution. It is a random parameter.
I mean, can attacker record that? Well, my question is, okay.
I don't
you use
think
the
so.
latency.
Yes, I don't
whatever.
think so.
Okay. You can use the thermal noise to do the shuffling. You use any kind of physical phenomenon to do the shuffling. That's true. Yes, physical phenomena is random. That's true. For example, thermal noise, right? We all know that's very random. We cannot control that, but it's difficult to record that. It's difficult to operate on this, right? So I mean, if the attacker, also, I believe the latency stuff, they're limited. It's not infinite, they're finite, right? So if the attacker recorded the order or recorded the latency, can they do the reverse shuffling?
Actually, I don't think so, because you randomly choose the latency from the uniform distribution, right?
Well, anyway, that's my question. Probably, if even you randomly choose, theoretically, yes, but technically, how can you operate? I mean, practically, how can you operate this?
So I think here, basically, there are two kinds of anonymizations required. The first is like communication channels. And the second is like the for example, in here, how you perturb like your A1, B1, C1. I guess what Xinrui explains is basically like how you shuffle the A1, B1, C1.
Yeah, I mean, let's leave alone the complex case. Let's talk about the model 1, right? So model shuffling, right? How can we do the shuffling here? Can we record that shuffling order? If we can record that.
Yeah, I just talk about the model shuffling. So it is just based on the item 2. You can read it, that sentence there, right? So you choose randomly.
Yeah, you sample that from you sample that from random distribution or whatever. Yes, it's random theoretically, but practically, how do you operate that? Can attacker record the order of the shuffling or not? Is that shuffling function private or public? That's all questions, right? practically, if you want to work on, I mean, fair learning is practical case. Theoretically, we can work on a lot of things so you can make it happen, you know. But practically, how can you operate this? How can you avoid the attacker to record the order and do the reverse engineering, reward shuffling? Anyway, that's my question. I mean, I think we should think about that, right? So, because intuitively, if we can record the shuffling function after the fair learning converge, we can reverse it. If we reverse it, all the shuffling doesn't make any sense from practical point of view. Also, who is the control of that? Who is in charge of it? I think I mean, local DP.
For the parameter shuffling, there's no need one to in charge of that. For example, I can explain the process. For example, each client split their model into A, B, C, 3 parts, and they randomly sample latency. For example, in the latency T1, maybe the client will send the A1, and the client 2 will send the B2, and the client 3 will send the A3. And when the server receives these parameters, he cannot distinguish which parameters is from which client.
Yeah, I understand. Even for the model shuffling, I understand. Each of them, they can randomly sample a number from there. But afterwards, the order is determined, right? For example, like you show the output of the model shuffling function, the orange one, next one, the yellow one, next one, the red one, next one, the orange one, next one, the blue one, purple one, and green one, right? That order is determined, right? That order is, can be recorded or not. If that one can be recorded, somehow, if you record it every global round, you can do the reverse shuffling. That's what I mean.
And so I just checked the original paper, and basically Jiahao shared a link in the chat, which was the original paper about using shuffling. And in their paper, the shuffler they're talking about is a separate third party, like from, it is supposed to provide network service and who do the shuffling, and who may control the arrival time, order, originating IP address.
Well, in that case, there's too many requirements.
Yes, that's definitely a lot of requirements.
Yeah, that means that we cannot do, we cannot do the reverse shuffling. Right? I think
with a third party, you definitely can control that.
Yeah.
Because you assume this third party is trustworthy. And I also remember some papers they mentioned like the shuffler. Yeah, for this paper, they did a third party. I'm not sure if in some other papers they relaxed it. And if I can see some paper that they only require anonymous communication. For example, you can use the onion routing using an anonymous communication channel. As long as you use anonymous communication channel, you can do that. Then it will be more practical, I guess. But shuffle, actually, using shuffling to improve privacy has been the topic that recently, like in the past 1 or 2 years, is on the rise. More papers are using that.
But I think we need to check it because, if you only check this shuffling, you change the order. Yes, that's true. I can understand that. But somehow, if we do reverse engineering, if we don't consider the IP address, third-party controller or whatever. You just do this like this figure. We do the shuffling. I understand, you know, each of the user, they can randomly select latency and, you know, according to the latency, you have a new order for that. And each round is different. I understand that. I also understand that random latency is purely random, right? But still, I don't understand if you publish the order of each round before aggregator do the aggregation. If we record that, we can do easy reverse. If we do reverse shuffling, then I don't think theoretically and practically it increases any kind of security or privacy.
Yes, so that's why I asked the Maoqiang in the first place, like the shuffling, I think is shuffling alone does not provide that protection. You need to have like shuffling together with like anonymous communication. That's what makes the shuffling really plays its role. And shuffling alone, like what Dr. Pan said, it can be reversed. So you need to have additional layer, like the anonymous communication to enforce that.
Okay, Maoqiang, please move on. Okay, that's only my question. I got doubts.
Okay. And with this shuffle mechanism, the privacy budget will be reduced significantly. And this is the entire algorithm. The difference between the traditional federated learning and the LDP, and this LDP federated learning is that in the local update, the S2 operation, data perturbation and the parameter shuffling.
Okay, Maoqiang, could you go to the previous page? I have another question.
Okay.
Assume, okay, with model shuffling, we can reduce the privacy budget from TD epsilon to D epsilon. Okay, if you design a more complicated mechanism, say it's a parameter shuffling or whatever, you can further reduce that from D epsilon to epsilon. First of all, I don't know how can you do the derivation. Probably I need a better understanding of that. But besides, if you can do that, can I probably design a much more complicated mechanism to further reduce, you know, the privacy budget from epsilon to say, okay, probably 1/n epsilon. Can we do that? I mean, intuitively, if you check the mechanism you provide in previous page, right? Number 10, page number 10. Could you go to that page? Okay. So number 1 compared to number 0, you do a model shuffling, right? You do a model shuffling. You shuffle the order. You make the shuffling more complicated. The shuffling can provide more privacy. Okay. So number 2, you further decompose each model into parameters, a 3 parameter, 4 parameter, whatever. Then you further reduce the privacy budget, right? So can I further decompose each weight, say, to probably from a vector to an element or shuffle the element, I can further reduce the privacy budget or something? Is that possible?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
I thought the parameter shuffling is already decompose a vector into elements.
Yeah, what I mean is you can we further decompose to, you know, I don't know if A1, B1, C1, exactly like Dr. Dong said, is just one element or, you know, a group of elements, right? If not one element, can we further divide that into one element and shuffle, you know, shuffle the things per element to further reduce the privacy budget? Is there a cost for that? We have the benefit of reduce the privacy budget, right? But definitely we're going to have cost. What's the cost of that?
Okay.
I don't know, but I'm not sure if you read the paper, you think about the question. I mean, every design we have a cost, right? We improve something. We're supposed to have a certain kind of cost. You know, definitely there were very good design, perfect design, you know, we improve that without any cost. Yeah. I think Jiahao said something we can further reduce. You can further reduce the piracy budget. Okay, there's a NIPS paper talking about.
Okay.
So is there a boundary? We reduce it to the element. Is there a boundary? Is the boundary of privacy budget we can reduce to the minimum privacy budget? And what is the cost for that?
Here, the cost means the cost for the shuffling or the cost for the privacy.
No. The cost for the federal learning itself. For example, you compare number one, number two.
Okay.
Obviously,
Okay.
number two is more complex. But you know, I want to understand the cost from whatever level, design level, implementation level, shuffling function, you know, design level, whatever, complexity level, whatever. You need to let us know what is the cost.
I haven't considered that.
Well, I think.
Did they mention it in the paper? Because I agree with Dr. Pan's view. So basically, what he said is, you can impose the cost somewhere else so that you can magnify the privacy. But some party or someone is behind all these costs. For example, in model shuffling, you have a shuffler underlying that, and so if you are just you just like release the cost on one side, but improve the cost on the other side, then it does not really provide much benefit.
They
so I think they should mention
mention
it, right? For example, in the evaluation or something.
I believe so.
When you have some new mechanism, you always need to analyze the potential cost. What you have these benefits, but what are these advantages?
They only mentioned the produced random latency, how the latency affect the communication time. They don't mention other costs.
Well, I think in that case, you should read beyond this paper. I mean, that's apply for all the students.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not okay. This paper says something. Definitely, all the papers say the good things of their design. They try to hide their bad things, even for our own paper. We do the same. But you need to read between the lines. You need to read beyond the paper, right? So to get what is the cost. For example, a very simple question, just like Dr. Gong asked. Oh, you add a perturb function, a shuffling function. Who will operate that function, right? So like Dr. Gong, the paper find it out. We need to add the IP perturbation stuff, and we find a third party in charge of it. That's also the cost, right? You make the system more complicated.
Okay.
All right. But don't take any things they see in the paper for granted. You need to think about that, right? So that's the only thing I want to suggest. It doesn't matter, it's just one paper, right? So, yeah. Anyway, please continue.
Okay. Now we talk about the experiments. In this paper, they use 3 data sets. For MNIST and the AppMNIST, they use a 2-layer CNN and set a fixed center and the radius for the layers. And for the CFAR10 dataset, they use a small VGG and set the center and the radius adaptively by the weight range of each layer. This figure shows that shows the effect of the number of clients on the training accuracy. We can see that by increasing the number of clients in training, the LDP-FL can perform as close as the noise-free federated learning. This figure shows the effect of the communication round and the fraction of clients. We can see with more communications, the LDP-FL can train a better model on all data sets through the proposed model. However, due to the complexity of data and tasks, CIFAR-10 needs more communication rounds for a better model. And when the fraction of clients is too small, it doesn't affect the performance on minutes, but affects significantly the performance on F-minutes and the CIFAR-10. And when the FR is close to 1, LDP-FL can achieve almost the same performance as the noise-free result on 3 datasets. These 3 figures shows the effect of the privacy budget epsilon. We can see that the LDP-FL can maintain the accuracy at a high level for a wide range of privacy budget. It's obviously that more complex data and tasks require more privacy budget. For example, the CIFAR-10, the epsilon need to larger than 5, but for the minutes, the epsilon need to be larger than 0.3. The main reason is that the complex task requires a complex neural model, which contains a large number of model weights. Meanwhile, the range of each weight is also wider in the complex task, which causes a larger variance for the estimated weights. This figure shows the effect of the radius. We can see that no matter how we tune the value of radius for fixed range setting, the model accuracy always stay around the 20% and can never be improved. The reason might be that the larger radius increase the variance of model weights estimation, but the smaller radius may generate the perturbed weights irrelevant to the true data range and cause an accuracy loss. They argue that for deeper neural networks, the fixed range setting might completely fail. Here is the comparison of the LDP-FL and other mechanisms. Here the epsilon is the privacy budget and the M is the communication round. From this table, we can see that compared to other mechanisms, LDP-FL needs many fewer communication rounds between the clients and the cloud. And also it can achieve a lower privacy budget. So they say that the LDP-FL achieved better performance on effectiveness, efficiency, and the privacy cost than prior works. However, they didn't compare the methods by the same model at the same time in the experiment. They only mentioned the experimental results from other papers. This result is directly mentioned from, refers from other papers. This table is the comparison of adaptive and fixed weight range settings. We can see that for the CIFAR-10, the adaptive range setting presents the greatest performance improvement over the fixed range setting. But on the less complex data sets such as F-MNIST and MNIST, the advantage of adaptive range setting disappears. There's no obvious difference in the two range setting. This is because the model on the CIFAR-10 is much deeper and more complex, such that the model weight range in each layer differs significantly. In such a case, the adaptive range setting is able to reduce the variance of the estimated weights in some layers when the corresponding weight range is small. So this improves the model accuracy dramatically. And this result also explains why previous approach use fixed range can achieve a good accuracy on simple and shallow model. Okay, finally, I will give the conclusion. In this paper, the authors propose an adaptive range setting for improved privacy, the trade-off between the privacy and the utility. And they also decide a parameter shuffling mechanism to mitigate the privacy budget explosion caused by high data dimension and many query iterations. And experimental results demonstrate that the performance of LDP-FL is superior to the previous native works on the same image classification task. But in this paper, they designed the parameter perturbation mechanism is changed them to some values. So maybe we can consider how to adjust the injected noise mechanism according to the parameter range of different layers to improve the trade-off between privacy and utility. And according to Dr. Pan and Dr. Gong, we can consider how the shuffling bring the cost and the utility to the differential privacy. And that's all.